Hi, folks. Welcome to the Brent Bozell Show. It's a special honor to have a friend on this show. Joe Concha, you know who he is. He's a Fox News contributor. He's a rotating co-host of the Big Saturday and Sunday show. He's been a co-host of the #1 show, The Five. He was a media and politics columnist for The Hill. He's the author of I love these books. Progressively Worse, Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkey. And Come On Man, The Truth About Joe Biden's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Presidency. Who the hell gave you these names, these titles for these books?
I came up with Joe Biden's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Presidency. And then HarperCollins, the publisher, they came up with Come On Man. And the cover's perfect. It's like, a yelling Biden. And it was very prophetic, actually, considering the way his presidency is ending. And then Progressively Worse, Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkeys. Yeah, that was all me. And when I wrote it in 2023, and by the time you get it out, in the bookshelves and, it goes through the whole legal process, it was 2024, July. But boy, I could not have imagined that this book could be any better timed, Brent, when you look back and, you lived through JFK, all right? The guy cut taxes. He was for a strong military. Jimmy Carter was a pro-life Democratic president, which is unthinkable now. Bill Clinton actually worked with the other side and got a balanced budget amendment and said the era of big government is over and worked on welfare reform. The middle positions that I could agree with. And even Barack Obama was called the deporter-in-chief because he actually had a competent Department of Homeland Security Secretary in Jay Johnson. But now you look at this Democratic Party and these ain't your daddy's donkeys when you look at all the positions that they're taking. And now we have Kamala Harris, the most liberal senator that we have seen in decades, is your presidential nominee on the Democratic side. So, I don't recognize this party anymore. That's certainly for sure.
Do you recognize your own profession?
No. God, no. And what a great question. I mean, when I got into this profession, I thought that I knew there were some people that leaned left, obviously, given the ecosystems of New York and Washington. But overall, I mean, when I was growing up, I had, I think Peter Jennings was a good anchor, for example. What could he have gone left? Maybe, but he didn't show it. It's so overt now. That's the whole thing. Tim Russert, I thought, was a great interviewer and moderator for Meet the Press. And it wasn't like he did anything elaborate, right? He would play a clip of a politician saying one thing and then ask him how he flip-flopped to this other position. And you just watch the guy or girl squirm. And he didn't get emotional. And I thought he did an excellent job. Now I don't recognize Meet the Press, obviously, anymore under Kristen Welker. And just overall, the journalism has become activism. And what gets you your next contract, Brent, is making sure you toe the Democratic narrative. If you go against that narrative, then you're not getting that next contract. You're not getting that next promotion. In the book, I talk about John Fetterman when he was running for Senate. And Dasha Burns, who's this, middle of the road, I guess, reporter for NBC News, or I should say nondescript, like I hadn't heard of her before. And all she did was have a conversation with Fetterman and then reported back that he had trouble having a basic conversation, needed closed caption, seemed really lost in his ability to articulate an argument. It was a very fair observation because we were all seeing that anyway. And then people were calling on her to be fired. Like, she's got to go. You can't do that. They got to win this Senate race. It's 50-50 in the Senate. What's she doing going against Fetterman like this? People like Kara Swisher and others saying she's going to be fired over what? Doing an accurate report? So do I recognize my profession? Absolutely not. And even in the book, we talk about MSNBC, how it used to be kind of a sane network where Jesse Ventura and Tucker Carlson had shows on MSNBC. I certainly don't recognize that network anymore, nor CNN. That's certainly for sure.
No, and I never thought, Joe, that I would one day look back to the good old days of Dan Rather. But if you looked at Dan Rather, or Tom Brokaw, or Peter Jennings, they all had biases, and they were all liberal biases. But the bias was in how they give a spin to a news story. Today, there's no interest in news. There's no interest in fairness. You tell me, you watched the debate. How did you think ABC handled this debate?
Four numbers to answer your question, Brent. 5 is your first number. 5 is a number of fact checks of Donald Trump during that debate. The next number is 0. That's the number of fact check of Kamala Harris during that debate. Next number is 6. That's the number of times they followed up with Trump after an answer. Port number 0, that's number of follow-ups that Kamala Harris got. So just based on those numbers alone, this clearly was completely and totally rigged against Donald Trump. He walked into an ambush. We all know who Dana Walden is now, of course, because she runs ABC News and literally set up Kamala Harris with Doug Emhoff decades ago. They've been very, very close throughout all these years. So obviously, David Muir and Lindsey Davis were given their marching orders. Do not make Kamala Harris uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form. If she lies, and I think we counted, 24 different lies that she told during that debate, you're not going to fact check her. You're going to fact check Trump. And we're going to only ask one question on the economy, really, given how big of an issue that is. Or even on Afghanistan, we're going to ask how Trump's plan was horrible, not that the withdrawal was actually horrible. And Trump, look, he took the bait every time when he didn't have to. When she brought up crowd sizes somehow in her immigration answer.
That got him.
He went for that shiny object, right? Mm-hmm. And then to bring up the dogs in Springfield, Ohio being eaten by Haitians, you have 1,000 different examples you could have gone to that are completely and totally factual on what illegal immigration is doing to this country. And he went with a story that may or may not be true. And that obviously everybody focuses on that instead of the actual problem. So it was a bad night all around. But ABC, it was just the worst moderated debate you will ever see. And if I'm Trump, I don't do another debate, but I do a town hall with Kamala Harris, where only the audience can ask questions, and these people must be vetted completely. Their social media, so we don't have any moles or plants in there. And I think he'd do much better in that situation. But I think he needs another debate because he can't end it on that note, because that may be the last impression people have of him before they vote.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that in a second. But first, our analysis of the debate, the way we looked at it, Joe, is we counted the number of questions asked of Kamala Harris. I mean, if you're going to do fact checking, which you ought not to do, that's what the debaters are supposed to do. The participants are supposed to do that, not the moderators. But if you're going to moderate and fact check one side, you have an obligation to do it to the other. What we saw was 13 questions asked of her. 3 of them were absolute softballs. And then the other 10 dealt to one degree with on policy, one degree or another, and she didn't answer a single question. She dodged every single question, and she wasn't fact-checked. Not once did they ever say, Vice President Harris, but that didn't answer my question. What are you going to do differently than Joe Biden in Israel? Right. You know, that sort of stuff. That's what got me. So now NBC is offering a debate, and Trump apparently is saying no. I agree with you. I don't think that that's a good decision to make on his part. What's your insight as to why you think he's saying no? Is he just negotiating?
Either probably. That's one thing, I'm sure. His internals probably show that he's still probably going to win this election. If he wins Pennsylvania, I think that's basically it, right? So maybe he thinks that would be risky, but I think in the end, he just doesn't trust the process in any way, shape, or form. And he even went on Fox at one point and after the debate and said, well, I don't want Brent and Martha doing it either. Well, I think they're going to be fair, having known them and worked with them. And I think they would ask good, tough, germane questions of both candidates and probably would stay out of the fact-checking business, to your point, unless you could do it equally. Don't bother doing it at all. We got to give Jake Tapper and Dana Bash credit because during that June debate, they didn't go there. And the Harris campaign apparently wanted to make absolutely sure that they did fact check this time around. And of course, Muir and Davis were more than happy to do so, only of Trump. So if I'm Trump, I do a town hall, I do it on Fox. If you're uncomfortable with the moderators for whatever reason, which again, I completely disagree with, then just say, I only want the audience to be asking questions. I wanted to go on for 2 hours, and that's it. I think that's what he's got to do.
I mean, there's no, with all respect to you, there's no rule that says it has to be a journalist who's asking the questions. But you know, Joe, what is frustrating watching this? I started the MRC in 1987. Since then, 1988, 1992, 1996, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020, and now 2024, the Republicans have bitched about the media covering debates. At a certain point, you got to say to them, well, maybe it's your fault. When you've got David Muir, who ABC, in the study that we released right before the debate, ironically, showing that in the 100 days since Kamala Harris had announced, it had been 100% positive coverage of Kamala Harris. And Donald Trump had gone through, by all accounts, a very positive convention. J.D. Vance was well received. He was doing well on the campaign. And by God, the man got shot in the head. And he still got 96% coverage, negative coverage by ABC. Why in the world did they agree to do this in the first place? They never should have.
I think Trump at the time, we got to go back to May of this year, and Joe Biden puts out that, again, he took the bait from Trump in this situation. Biden puts out a video saying, all right, pal, basically goes full Clint Eastwood, anytime, anywhere, I'm proposing 2 debates, you take him or not. And of course, Trump, being Trump, said, all right, I'm going to clean this guy's clock, because we saw what state of mind Joe Biden was in at that point. So he thought he was getting Joe Biden for 2 debates, and no matter where it was, he was going to do well. And we saw on the CNN debate that he did do well by letting Biden sink himself and not taking any bait during that. And mostly the focus was on Biden for obvious reasons. But in the end, if you're Trump, if we look back on this race, Brent, and Trump ends up losing by a hair again, I think the decision to do the debates, one in June, one in early September, I think tactically Trump probably should have said, sure, I will debate you, but I'm not going to debate until after our respective conventions, because I want to see if you're going to be the nominee, Mr. Biden. And then we'll do it when people are back from vacations and everybody's engaged after Labor Day. I'll do 2 with you in September, 1 September, 1 October. I'll do 4 with you. I don't care. But we're going to do it after our conventions because I got to see if you're still going to be my opponent. And people would have bought that answer. That would have been a reasonable answer. So then we would have had a situation where Biden melts down in the first debate here in September, and they wouldn't have time to switch him out because the ballots have already gone out in many states, and then Trump wins this race quite easily. So I think the decision to do that debate just on the fly, just say, yeah, no problem, I'll agree to everything that you say. I'll agree to CNN, who hates me, and ABC, who really hates me, and I don't care because I know I could clean your clock. And I think that's that. When we look back on this race, that decision may be the reason why Trump didn't win, but I still say he does win.
Okay, a final question. And I think this really puts what's happening in its proper perspective. We just witnessed a second assassination attempt on President Trump. This time, shots weren't fired, but how it was within minutes of possibly having his head blown off yet again. To me, it's amazing to see how the media reported this. This exchange between MSNBC reporter Alex Witt and contributor, MSNBC contributor and Obama official Elise Jordan. This is the question. Do you expect to hear anything from the Trump campaign about toning down the rhetoric, toning down the violence, or would that be atypical of the former president? And the response from Elise Jordan is, I don't know how long this moment of unity for the country, where we come together and say, I don't want any political opposition to be under the threat of violence. It's not okay, any threat of violence, we don't want. In other words, it's Donald Trump's rhetoric that caused him almost to be shot again. The same sentiment was echoed by ABC Lindsay Davis. Once again, she talked about how his statements about the dogs in Springfield, Ohio, caused this. I'm not kidding you. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard tied both assassination attempts to January 6th. NBC said that it's his increasingly fierce rhetoric, specifically the, quote, dogs and cats story out of Springfield, Ohio. Final question to you. What does this say to you about the media and the hatred for this man that in 2 assassination attempts, they blame him for it?
They blame him for. You remember that first assassination attempt? You had people like Ari Melber on MSNBC saying, "Oh, Trump's actually wearing that bandage. It's just a prop. He's doing it for sympathy." No, he just got his ear blown off. And we're going to, well, maybe he wasn't shot. Maybe the teleprompter had sharded glass. Remember that whole narrative that was being pushed as well? And then you said NBC, how they blamed Trump's fierce rhetoric. That was Lester Holt that night. I remember I was on Fox and I read the quote to Mark Levin when we were interviewing him and said, can you believe that this is the NBC Nightly News anchor that is blaming Trump's rhetoric for him getting shot? Maybe, just maybe, calling Trump Hitler all these years. Remember when Brian Stelter had his Reliable Sources show, he had a guest on one time that said that Trump had killed more people than Hitler, Stalin, and Mao combined. And Stelter just sat there and let him get away with it. And when he was called out on it afterwards, he said, "Oh, actually, my audio went out. I didn't hear the answer." That's where we are at this point, where Donald Trump basically is getting the short skirt sentiment. In other words, when a woman is sexually assaulted, then you hear some horrible people say, "Well, she was wearing a short skirt." In other words, Trump had this coming to him because of the way he speaks. No, when you call a guy Hitler, and every day your bumper sticker is that he is a threat to our very democracy who must be stopped. Dan Goldman of New York, a congressman, I call him the poor man's Adam Schiff. He said in an interview with Jen Psaki that Trump needs to be eliminated. Well, what else can you derive from that by eliminated? Beat at the ballot box is one thing. Eliminated means removed from the planet. So, and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, by the way, they put out statements, but Kamala Harris couldn't get in front of a camera and say, "This is wrong, please." She had one thing she had to say: "Please do not shoot my opponent." All right, this is wrong. And she couldn't do that. Biden says, "Oh, I guess we need more Secret Service agents." Where were you 2 months ago when clearly they didn't have enough agents to guard the perimeter? It happens again. And now I'm at this point where, Brent, incompetence by the Secret Service, that's one thing, but even after July 13th in Pennsylvania, they do nothing to improve the security of Donald Trump. And this guy is seated in a sniper's nest for 12 hours outside of the 6 hole and nobody does a perimeter check. I'm just, everything is scary right now. Our media is horrible. And then even our institutions, less and less trust of them as well. And eventually someone's going to be successful with Trump. They're just going to keep trying until it actually is successful. And I can't believe we're having this conversation where we have to wonder whether Trump will even get to Election Day at this point.
Yeah. And, if something really terrible were to happen to him, my God, how are they going to blame him for that one? Joe, and it's got, I'm going to leave it with this comment here. Conservatives are pointed, we are accused of being the haters and the threats to democracy and all that good stuff. And your network has had all manner of bricks thrown at it over the years. I'm going to make this statement, that there isn't now, nor has there ever been, a single person who was an employee of Fox on the air who has ever said anything along the lines of what you just said has been said about Donald Trump. Not anybody. Ever in the history of Fox. So I hope people remember that. The next time the left attacks Fox News, just understand this. And this is not a paid commercial for Fox, but I do mean this. Next time they do it, remember, no one from Fox has ever lowered himself or herself to that level. Anyway, Joe, thank you. We're going to see you on our cruise on November 10th. You're going to be with us. And I'm taking advantage of this. MRCCruise.com. Go to it, sign up, be with Joe. We're going to be drinking in bars on different islands. We'll be stumbling all over each other. It'll be a lot of fun. Joe, thanks so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Brent. Thank you very much.